I'm sure you all have heard of video games or played them when you were a kid. But do you know the history, the pros and cons, or the viewpoints on them? Let me inform you about all of that. By the end of this speech, you all will know the history on video games, the pros and cons on video games, and the different viewpoints on video games. I've played video games since I was about 8 years old, and I still play them today. Video games are important to know about because they're always being created and they are always going to be here. I'll talk to you today about the pros and cons of video games, the different viewpoints on video games, and finally the history on video games. First, let's start with the pros and cons on video games. According to Ginger Michael at Video Games World 2007, the pros of video games are: it increases your reaction time, Gendra 2007, page 3. Another pro is it increases your decision making, Gendra 2007, page 3. And you can also meet new people, which is always a plus. According to Michael Gendra at Video Games World 2007, the cons of video games are: it encourages you to adapt to a short attention span, Gendra 2007, page 4. Another con is it can become addictive, Gendra 2007, page 4. It can affect your productivity with school and your job, and that can lead to getting bad grades or getting fired. It can also lead to violent crime, Gendra 2007, page 4. Next, let's talk about the history of video games. According to Neotrey Kristen, Game On to Game After, Source Up for Video Game History, 2019. In the early years, Computer Space was the first commercial arcade game to hit the shelves in the 70s. Neotrey, 2019, page 1. William Higginbotham created the first ever handheld controllers for video games, and he also created the first display of motion on the computer. Neotrey, 2019, page 1. The first video game was called Tennis for Two, created by William Higginbotham in the 50s. The popularity. Pong is the first ever successful arcade video game, which came out in the 60s. Neotrey, 2019, page 1. 60% of Americans throughout the United States play video games. Neotrey, 2019, page 1. Video game sales have reached $36 billion in the United States. Neotrey, 2019, page 1. Different ways to play the video games are on consoles, which is the most popular way. You can also play them on computers, phones, and tablets, which is called mobile games. And also, you can go to the arcades and play games, where it first started. Moving on, let me inform you about the different viewpoints on video games. According to Gale Opposing Viewpoints Online Collection, 2019. The good viewpoints on video games are: it improves your cognitive skills, your accuracy, your attention, your reaction time, and your visual spatial reasoning processing. Gale, 2019. It can also relieve stress, promote healthy mood management. Gale, 2019. Many video games foster pro-social behavior and improve group problem solving. Gale, 2019. The bad viewpoints on video games, according to Gale, are: several critics say that video game use can lead to violent behavior. Gale, 2019. Politicians, parent groups, and the media continue arguments saying that violent video games attribute to real-world violence. Gale, 2019. In online settings, players can use racist, sexist, and anti-LGBTQ slurs without disclosing their identities, also staying anonymous. Gale, 2019. To conclude, I informed you about video games today. It is important, video games are important because they will always be around and are always being created. We talked about the pros and cons, the history of video games, and the many different viewpoints on video games. Now, decide for yourself if you think video games are a good or bad thing in today's world. Also, ask people if they've had a positive or negative experience dealing with video games. Thank you.
You got one over 6 minutes, so.